Monday Night Raw delivered one of those moments that instantly makes fans stop, listen, and start debating what could happen next. What began as a simple confrontation between Bron Breakker and Oba Femi quickly turned into a major statement about who WWE sees as the next generation of its biggest stars. There was no need for chaos or an over-the-top confrontation. The tension came from the words, the confidence, and the history building between these two competitors. Breakker entered the situation believing he had every reason to question Femi's sudden rise, while Femi carried himself like someone who already believed he had answered that question through his performances. The contrast between them made the segment especially compelling. Breakker represented aggression, confidence, and a desire to prove that he belonged at the very top. Femi represented patience, composure, and the belief that his recent accomplishments had already earned him that position. By the end of the segment, neither man had physically settled anything, but Femi had certainly made his presence felt. More importantly, WWE had created the feeling that this rivalry was no longer just about competition. It had become a battle over recognition, momentum, and the future direction of the company. Femi's rise to the spotlight. The biggest reason this confrontation carried so much weight was the momentum Oba Femi had built before stepping into the ring with Breakker. Femi had recently come through a major challenge involving Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, and the victory dramatically changed the way fans viewed him. Defeating an established name of Lesnar's stature immediately placed Femi in a different conversation. Suddenly, he was no longer simply another promising young superstar waiting for his opportunity. He looked like someone WWE could realistically build around for years to come. That momentum created an obvious question. If Femi was becoming one of the company's most talked-about rising stars, where did that leave Bron Breakker? Breakker had already established himself as one of WWE's most physically impressive young performers and had spent considerable time competing at a high level. He had every reason to believe that he should be part of the same conversation. That is what made the confrontation so interesting. Neither competitor needed to convince fans that he had potential. Both had already demonstrated it. The real question was, which one could separate himself from the other and take the next step toward becoming a centerpiece of WWE's future? Breakker wants an answer. When Bron Breakker stepped into the ring and demanded an answer, it was clear that this was not simply a routine promotional segment. Breakker wanted to know who WWE believed was the real future. He was essentially forcing Femi to stand across from him and explain why he deserved the attention he had recently been receiving. Breakker's confidence was understandable, because he has built his reputation around intensity and self-belief. He does not usually wait for opportunities to come looking for him. Instead, he makes his intentions known and expects people to recognize what he brings to the table. But this time, the response did not come from Femi immediately. Instead, Paul Heyman appeared, instantly changing the atmosphere. Heyman has always been one of WWE's most effective figures when it comes to creating uncertainty with a few carefully chosen words. Rather than giving Breakker the straightforward answer he wanted, Heyman turned the question back toward him. Who really is the future? That simple question made the situation even more intriguing because it suggested that WWE was intentionally allowing both men to fight for that distinction. The handshake that raised questions. Perhaps the most interesting visual came after the match announcement. Heyman shook hands with Breakker and then offered the same gesture to Femi. On the surface, it was a simple moment of respect, but the symbolism was impossible to miss. Heyman's connection to Breakker makes the interaction particularly interesting because it creates questions about where his loyalties truly stand. By acknowledging Femi in the same moment, Heyman appeared to be recognizing that Femi had become an important figure in this evolving story. It does not necessarily mean that Heyman has chosen sides, but it certainly gives fans something to discuss. Wrestling thrives on moments like this because a simple gesture can create several possible directions for a storyline. Could Heyman eventually play a larger role in the rivalry? Could his relationship with Breakker change? Is he simply trying to keep both competitors focused on the bigger match? None of those questions has to be answered immediately. In fact, leaving them unanswered may be exactly what makes the story more interesting. Why the rivalry feels different. What separates this rivalry from an ordinary WWE confrontation is that both men have legitimate reasons to believe they should be considered future main event stars. Breakker has the name, the athletic ability, the confidence, and the experience of already competing at a high level. Femi has the momentum, the recent breakthrough victory, and the feeling that WWE is rapidly elevating him. Neither man needs to be portrayed as weak for the other to look strong. That is important because the best rivalries between rising stars are built around competition rather than simply trying to make one person look superior. The September 6 match has the opportunity to establish a new chapter for both competitors. A victory for Femi would strengthen the idea that his rise is becoming unstoppable. A victory for Breakker would remind everyone that he remains one of WWE's most important young stars and cannot be overlooked. Either outcome could push the story forward, which makes the match feel meaningful rather than simply being another stop on the schedule. September 6th suddenly matters. Now, all eyes turn toward September 6th in Atlanta, where Bron Breakker and Oba Femi are scheduled to settle their differences inside the ring. The biggest question is no longer who talks the best or who looks the most confident during a confrontation. The question is who can actually deliver when the spotlight becomes unavoidable. Femi enters with enormous momentum and the belief that his recent accomplishments have already proven his value. Breakker enters with something equally powerful, determination to remind everyone that he has been building toward this level for a long time. Their confrontation on Raw may have ended without a decisive winner, but it accomplished something arguably more important. It created anticipation. It made fans choose sides. It gave both competitors something personal to fight for without taking away from the larger story of WWE's future. When the bell finally rings, all the speeches, handshakes, questions, and predictions will disappear. What remains will be two ambitious young stars with an opportunity to show exactly why they believe they belong.